And what's the deal, boys and girls? It is the Greg. Thanks for hanging out with us. The barbershop. Let me just tell the hardworking fans of Baltimore, a place I do love and care a lot about. My heart aches for y'all today because you went from being some sort of elite, premier organization to basically looking like the Clampets from back in the day. And for those of y'all who don't know who the Clampets are, they were like the Beverly Hillbillies. They fell into a vat of money, but they were still country folk and ignorant to the world. I get the sense that something in Ravensland has taken an exit off of being one of the most pristine organizations in all of sports to, wow. I mean, it's like they've become clown college. There's an amazing that has been hovering over Baltimore really since the beginning of the season that was initiated by yours truly. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm about 30 miles away from Baltimore. So I get the news and follow closely both the Ravens and the Commanders. And while the Commanders went sort of rogue by dismissing Joe Witt Jr. as defensive coordinator on Monday, we find out Tuesday that John Harbaugh did not resign. He was fired by the Ravens. And there were some things, I mean, when you think about that, this is a guy that he had an 18-year run. And, you know, normally when you hit 18, at least in my generation, it was time for you to get out the house. You were supposed to be grown enough, and in my case, man enough to handle some responsibilities, and that's where you go to college. Now, you know, this is a Raven team that has consistently underperformed over the last 3 or 4 years. There's no getting around that. And while officials and their reasons talk about that, there had been some media nonsense suggesting that there was friction, right? An inability to elevate past just being a playoff team. And what I find to be most confusing about the scenario in Baltimore is that this move has a massive potential cap hit for Lamar Jackson. And, you know, Steve Bisciotti made his money at the Baltimore Harbor. He was one of those guys that was big into his family's into steel mill shipping and stuff like that. So he knows about downsizing. He knows about building brands. And you got to admit, the Ravens have been in contention for the entire time that John Harbaugh has been there. It is a very, very, very attractive job until Tuesday. Now, if you're a coach right now, you're talking about an organization that was in all the stormy waters of the NFL throughout the last 2 decades. Steve Bisciotti has done a great job at building a franchise. They may have had their off-field troubles, you know, the Justin Tucker, the kicker thing, and the Ray Lewis thing happened before Bisciotti was owner. So the Ravens find themselves a rudderless boat in the Chesapeake Bay right now. They are just coasting along. Now, again, you would have to think that Bisciotti, the owner, who is reportedly the guy that is in charge of making this decision right now, how does that affect Lamar Jackson? And see, now I believe that there is a legitimate reason to believe that despite what many in Baltimore want, it could be a case of Jackson being dealt and Harbaugh being gone. Now, it may be in the Ravens case a little bit easier for them to find a coach than it is for them to find a player of his magnitude. But if you're Lamar Jackson right now, you're coming off a season from hell where you were injured, you were trying to come back from injuries. I got to look at the Harbaugh thing. And to me, what I find most shocking is the offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, is the one who's gone. The 2 coordinators should have been the one that were fired. Let's be clear about that. I think you can find coordinators, but the voice of Harbaugh must have died in that locker room. And then I think when the Baltimore Sun writes the story that Lamar Jackson has been showing up at practice late, missing practice, and the whole bit, and even some of the most reasoned sports analysts in that market have been talking about maybe they had some things like Lamar rules. He could do things different than anybody else. But you do have special rules for special players. And Lamar Jackson is not the reason that the Ravens have underachieved. He is the reason that they've stayed in contention when all the holes weren't filled. That brings us to Todd Monken, who has to be one of the worst play callers in the NFL, pardon me. There's no doubt about that. You know, when you've got a great play caller, he has a feel for his quarterback, he has a feel for the game, and when you're calling the plays, all that is synergy. They're in lockstep. Todd Monken's play calling strategy makes no sense. When you got a physical advantage, you want to throw the football. When you need to throw the football, you want to run the football. They seem to have unlocked Derrick Henry, but they couldn't keep him on, lock, so to speak, from the standpoint of mauling people. So there are some philosophical changes that need to go on in Baltimore, but this one just seems like it was scorched earth. And I can tell you right now, just from personal conversations that I've had with friends of mine in the business who are fans of the team and of the sport, they're scratching their heads. You knew the change was coming, but did Baltimore make the right move? And I think it's a fair question to ask. Letting John Harbaugh go or forcing him to make changes with his coordinators, because Todd Monken and Zach Orr were awful this year. And it's been that way for a couple of years. Now, look, I understand that Harbaugh and Zach Orr probably have some type of father-son type of relationship, but Zach Orr did not get it done. You could never bank on the Ravens. And again, I'm judging by Rex Ryan's standards as a defensive coordinator, like Mike Macdonald as a coordinator, which is going to really bring to mind the question if Mike Macdonald, now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, the Seattle Seahawks that have the number 1 seed in the NFC. He was on the staff 2 years ago. You had him. Now, somewhere along the line, if this move that Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, is reportedly responsible for, then where was his vision in that moment to recognize this dude's a superstar? I might want to have a critical conversation with Harbaugh, and we let this transition go smoothly. Because here's the deal. This is almost akin to like a death in the family in many respects if you're a Raven fan, because you've lost someone despite what you feel of him as a guidance to the Super Bowl. And it is what it is. And Super Bowl winning coaches with solid front offices are supposed to achieve more than what the Ravens have done over the last half decade safely. And in many respects, the frustration of being told that you have this great organization, that you have the best roster in football. And that was the one that I thought was a little deep, and I didn't think that Harbaugh got the most out of it. And part of that has to do with the fact that I don't think he had any real idea on calling plays. And why do I bring that up? He made his name as a special teams coach. Now, I don't want to disrespect the special teams, but the nuances of their schemes and when you implement them is something totally different than if you're talking about like a position group, because you bring folks that can't get on the field to your special teams and they become a group. And that was where Harbaugh made his name. And you can manage a game when you're in touch with what's going on the sidelines. And I can tell you that my colleagues in Baltimore who've been watching this for the last 5 years or so have been scratching their heads for at least that long. Oh, while it is somewhat and has been somewhat of a cloudy day in the DMV, I will have to say without any measure of a doubt that this was sort of an inevitable circumstance. And the way it went down leads me to believe that the owner of the organization was kind of waiting to see what played out in Pittsburgh and how it played out to see whether or not that Harbaugh had a place in the future. And it's assumed that, and based upon the latest information that I get, there was a conversation in a meeting. I think some issues were discussed, and apparently Bisciotti and John Harbaugh did not see eye to eye So now Harbaugh's gone. Baltimore is now a free agent franchise. Go figure that. I got to believe it's attractive. There's a roster there. You still have Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson can still play. Lamar Jackson did not get John Harbaugh fired. As a matter of fact, I think that if you have a talk with Lamar right now, he's sick about this too. You lose a game in the way that they did when he did about just as much as anybody could to get them to the playoffs. And they just, I mean, they lost it on a foot. I'm never one that wants to bank on a foot to win the game. But it's just irony how you've had some of the great kickers ever in the history of the league that played for this franchise. And on the last play that John Harbaugh coached, a all-time special teams coach with the Eagles, comes from a family of legacy. But his last game as a Baltimore Ravens coach comes down to a kick that really goes wide right. And it is just the ultimate irony for a proud franchise and a coach who, quite frankly, I think he grew into arrogance from his success. And it's kind of like, Frank Lucas, the mafia guy. And sometimes absolute power and great deal of success corrupts. I'm not going to say that John Harbaugh was corrupt, but he lost touch with the locker room full of black guys and a community in Baltimore that's primarily black. And I think somewhere when you lose that touch, he seems losing. We'll talk more about this on the other side as we continue to rock on. It's OG Sports Rap. I am Professor G. Mark Bray. Barbershop is open. Come get your trim, shot, and learn something before the night is done. On OG Sports Rap, the network. Remember, he's all we got. I had backed off this John Harbaugh story for a bit, but it just kind of amplifies how the fallout from, and I'm used to Black Monday, the day that, all hell is to pay for teams who have sorry records and bad coaches. But this John Harbaugh thing is just at another level all by itself. And we're not going to spend the whole show talking about it because there are other things that are going on. We got the college football playoffs that are kicking off, then a little bit under 24 hours from where we are right now as you listen to our quality radio product. And again, card-carrying member of the University of Miami fan club here. Even got some new gear for the game. So let's go Canes. Really. Let's go Canes. But this brings up an interest in mind, a storyline, the Harbaugh thing, because here's a dude that was in one job for 18 years. Okay. It's rare these days if you stay in a job beyond 5 or 10. That's just how it is. So 18 years, 2 decades is a long time. But can you really look at a guy who has had a talented quarterback like Lamar Jackson and couldn't get to the Super Bowl? Now, he won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco and a team that was really led by its defense and the character of guys like Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs, Ed Reed, guys like that. You have to ask yourself one question about John Harbaugh. Is he a control freak? Is he the dude that has to be the alpha? Is he the dude that, has a sort of smarmy kind of way of presenting himself, which no longer works on this era of player? And I think a lot of coaches have to do some soul searching these days because as one who works with these precocious or young adults, which in many cases the average NFL player is, you're somewhere between, you're coming into the league, say between 23 and 25, and you play to about, you're 35 and you're still growing up. And this new world order of privileged athlete who needs to be coddled, who needs to be spoken to in a certain way, maybe your voice plays out. You ever think about that? You ever had a boss that just was so scorched earth that you really couldn't take them serious in good times or bad times because they just don't know how to relate? Could that be what happened in Baltimore? I'm efforting to find out answers to those questions as we continue to move it along here on the program. But you see that happen a lot in sports. And then to the flip side of it, you look at how it's playing out in college football right now, where you see new voices that are outside the blue blood crucible are now having their impact on that sport. And the name that comes to mind is Kirk Cignetti at Indiana, who took a notorious basketball program and has made it into arguably the best team left standing in college football on the road to this 2026 college football national championship. When do you know when the message stops working? Is it an 8-9 record? Is it a missed field goal? Is it a series of events? And I think we're seeing a lot these days in sports of premature divorces. Now, as one who survived a divorce previously, it's an awful thing to have to go through. Changes your life, changes your finances, changes your perspective on a few things. And I think what we're looking at right now in our world of sports is a changing of the guard. We're looking at some generational shifting. And look, the bottom line is, and I think this is where the Professor G and me emanates from. You got to read the room. And when you're a leader of younger people now, you got to be able to pivot. And the old school was always do as I say and not as I do. That's not flying in the face of empowered athletes. It just is not. Now, I can make a compelling argument because I hate the accent of the Ravens locker room. Everybody sounds, country. And with all due respect, oftentimes guys stand behind the podium, and to me, they sound like they speak in slave. I get no call. I can't talk about that. I don't know about that. I want somebody who speaks with force, speaks with truth to power. I don't know if the Ravens or a lot of other organizations are comfortable with the whole notion of speaking truth to power. Sometimes you got to shake up the apple cart in order to move units, if you will, right? Units being, this case, winning games. And I just don't know if Harbaugh can do that as well as he did back in the day. But I'm anxious to see when he gets his next shot. Was it about coach or was it about organization? Because suddenly, after an 18-year career to me, John Harbaugh is now on blast. We know you can win a Super Bowl. We know you can win, but you had one of the most transcendent talents in the history of the game, and you didn't get to a Super Bowl with him. And he was playing at an MVP level. So you can't blame it on the organization. You look at teams like the Jets, the Giants, the Cowboys to a lesser extent. One thing about the Cowboys, they spend money, but they got so much dysfunction in the front office that I think it seeps its way onto the sidelines, and it will always be that way as long as that clown show in Dallas continues. All right. But you have a lot of people, a lot of organizations where you have quiet owners, and they stink too. I mean, you don't hear a lot of noise from Mark Davis with the Raiders. You don't hear a lot of noise from Arthur Blank with the Falcons. You don't hear a lot of noise coming from these front offices. Now, there's always noise in Philly and New York because of the media attention and the guys in the press and ladies who want to make headlines for themselves and clickbait for their social media. But how do you address that moving forward? I mean, Al Davis said it best. Mark Davis said, just win, baby. Just win, baby means you're not 8-9. That also plays out in the association as well. So again, got to look back at some of the other things that are going on right now, because what we're seeing is changing of the guard in the landscape of sports before our very eyes. There's going to be some seismic shifting over the next 12, 18 months. I mean, you just think about it. Look at the association for a second. Chances are you come into next season with no Steph Curry, no LeBron James. The league will continue to move forward, but it just won't be the same. There's a possibility that, Kevin Durant is going to say bye within the next 3 years. If you believe the innuendo that I've been hearing from folks who are closer to the vest than I am in my neck of the woods, because quite frankly, I am a DMV guy and I got sources that know something, but then again, they don't know anything. But it's crazy. How do you know when to pull the plug? That is just bananas to me. And 18 years and a Super Bowl win, you look at what went down in Washington. I mean, this was nuclear winter on either side of the parkway. Make no mistake about that. John Harbaugh fired after 18 seasons. Then you get Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt Jr. made it basically in Washington. So both coordinators gone, which really brings to mind a question. Who's at the top of the food chain on either freaking side of the parkway. I'm just, it's the craziest sports day, one of them I've ever seen in my life. But there were other things that went on around the landscape. And I think one of them, speaking of LeBron James, is I'm not going to count down the days to LeBron retires. Okay. I just don't know how much longer his body is going to hold up. But I know one thing. If LeBron and Luka can talk to Father Time or Mother Nature, whomever, to give them a respite, they kind of showed a recipe for just how good they can be when each of them get 30 last night, and as the Lakers beat the Pelicans 111-103. And really, you start talking about the Pelicans for a second. Why? I just can't figure out why they can't put it together. And it's not like this is a team that doesn't have solid front office guys who know a thing or two about constructing rosters. But I'm going to have to say this. Of all number one NBA draft picks over the last, say, 20 years, the most disappointing now has to be Zion Williams. And Zion Williamson had all the physical tools necessary to be a destructive force in the league. A, he can't stay healthy. And B, I don't even think he wants it. And when you look at him, he just kind of seems to be in a daze. I don't know whether the game came too easy to him, and he was just a man amongst boys while he was making his way through college. But he's up and down like an EKG. And when do you fish or cut bait with this guy? Seriously, he can't stay healthy. He doesn't know how to put a team on his back. And I think once he gets out of there, maybe Derek Queen can step into that role. Now, again, Derek Queen is a better basketball player. He's got better basketball skills. I would say you just look at his footwork in the paint. He's got a face-up game. He's got a mid-range jump shot. I mean, Derek Queen is one of those kind of performers, and you'll remember him because he was the kid at the University of Maryland that hit the big shot that sent them to the Sweet 16 last year. And he was the one that said, I'm just a kid from Baltimore, and now he's an icon. Moral to the story is the Pelicans have too much damn talent to be hovering near the Mendoza line of not making the playoffs. And you consider that 1-2 punch that New Orleans was expecting to have, it's like the old Kool-Aid commercials. Like they've fallen into a pool and they can't swim or anything. And you're beginning to wonder if New Orleans is a place that will ever have a contending basketball team, because the front office executives have always seemed to find a way to have enough talent around there to just be good enough to frustrate their base. And I think that's where I am most of all with the whole Pelican saga. Now, one thing about it, they're so bad defensively that they make LeBron and Luka look like they're drinking from the fountain of youth. I mean, you get 60 points out of them. If you can get 60 points, and I don't think you can every night, but between 50 and 60 out of that duo, the Lakers are going to be, I'm not going to say a force, but they're going to be a tough out. I don't think that they're physically going to be able to handle the grind of the entire 82-game schedule with the berating of J.J. Redick. I don't think J.J. Redick knows how to load manage. I think he gets into pensions of frustration where he just wants to throw out there and let guys work through it, and that's not a healthy scenario for the well-being of the team, number one, and number two, to be a championship contender. So you got to watch that. And I'm monitoring that. Now, he is maniacal with all that. And I will say this appears to be the nature of the coach who played for Krzyzewski. Krzyzewski was an intense guy. And a lot of his former understudies are coaches right now, but they seem to be able to manage it. I saw Duke last night against Louisville, and we'll open up that can a little bit later on the other side. Duke's good. I'll say this before we go to break. They used to recruit basketball players. Now they're recruiting athletes who play basketball. They're going to be a tough out in March. It's your boy, Professor G. Mark Gray. It's OG Sports Rap on the network. Remember, folks, we all we got. Well, the good news is we got about another couple of weeks of meaningful college football to talk about, but college basketball season has now cranked up. We're pretty much at the midway point I think the texture of the NCAA tournament is beginning to come to the top of the surface. And I will say this, having watched Duke in earnest against Louisville last night, Duke's going to be a tough out. I kind of came into the season thinking that Houston was going to have a chip on their shoulder after the way the NCAA tournament had played out last year. You know, they couldn't get a last-second shot off against Florida. Florida wins the game. Florida's going to be a tough out, too. But I look at Duke and having remembered the halcyon days of Duke being in the ACC. And one thing about living in Maryland, you hate Tobacco Road. What is Tobacco Road? Any place in North Carolina that used to grow tobacco, literally, and play college basketball. And you grow up as a Maryland guy, which was always the northernmost school in the conference, and would routinely get cheated. Okay, I'm going to say that on the air publicly. Went to Carmichael Auditorium where Carolina used to play before the Dean Dome, and they used to turn over the numbers when the team was scoring like he was in an old rec league game. You know, some of the worst calls ever went against Lefty Driesell there, in Cameron, at Duke, you know, all that. I mean, it sucked to watch. But now that Maryland's moved to the Big Ten, you can keep somewhat of an objective eye if you're in my shoes on that conference. And what I saw Duke, and it's still kind of crazy to me as an old school ACC apologist from back in the day, seeing Duke play Louisville in an ACC game. And what I saw was, well, Louisville's always had athletes. I mean, you go back to the days of Darrell Griffith, Dr. Duncanstein, and go ahead and look him up, y'all new school folks. So you think you was rising above the rim back in the day, but Darrell Griffith was one of those guys that could leap so high he could, you know, pull a quarter off of the top of the glass, of the backboard, if you will, at that time. Okay. So to watch a team like that who gave us like the Purvis Ellisons in the world and all that stuff, to watch Duke be a more athletic team than Louisville was shocking. I literally sat in awe and watched the athleticism of Duke, which is not to say they didn't have athletes in the past. Aaron Hill gets looked upon as a great basketball player, but he was a hell of an athlete until his knees went bad on him, quite frankly. But you didn't look at Bobby Hurley and you didn't think he was an athlete. He was a great basketball player. There are a bunch of dudes like that at Duke that you would say they're structured basketball players. They play a disciplined, regimented system based upon the teachings of Mike Krzyzewski as learned from Bob Knight. And then a funny thing happened. You know, Duke started realizing we got to get some players. We got to get a different breed of players if we're going to still compete in this league. They got them now. And I will say this. I'm not ready to put the number one pick handle on Cameron Boozer, but I don't know if there's a better big man in the country than Boozer. The Boozer twins, and Carlos doesn't have to give Duke any money now that he's given both of his sons to John Shire and the Duke program. Duke's big. They can play physical now. They're well coached by John Shire. They just, you know, and as intense as he is, he seems to know when to push it hard and back off. Why do I bring that up? I look at J.J. Redick, and all he does is push, 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 push. At some point, you got to ease up, even in the intensity of the game. And I think that John Shire can help J.J. to be more disciplined on the bench. And I think over the course of an 82-game schedule, you can wear older players out like Luka and LeBron, and then they're just gassed for the postseason. I'm looking at John Shire right now, and his team is deep. This is, you know, it's not like Duke doesn't go into the portal anymore. It's not like Duke doesn't go after that, you know, top 5 player, because they can get him now. And I looked at Duke, and I saw a team that has Final Four written all over it. Now, injuries, you know, matchups in the tournaments, they're all mitigating factors. So I dare not put anybody in the Final Four as of yet. It's going to be a very interesting tournament, too, because I don't think there's a clear favorite in the country, but you got at least a handful of teams who all have legitimate shots at claiming a championship that's still in the hands of Florida, and Florida still has talent on that team. Now, whether or not after taking all the pats on the back and all that kind of stuff that goes with winning a national championship if they can come back from. But I will say this. Florida and Duke, to me, at this point in the season, have impressed me the most. I will say, however, I'm only really beginning to ratchet up the college basketball life for the 2026 campaign. All right, because we're there right now. And despite all the troubles that college basketball has with it right now, it's not with the on-court product. It's with the off-court nonsense. And again, right at the heart of the matter is the situation with James Nanji. And it just goes to prove, once again, that the NCAA is clueless in terms of running intercollegiate athletics. Now, if you remember the story about this guy, James Nanji, who's a 7-foot center from Nigeria, he played professionally in the Euro League with 4 seasons for FC Barcelona and a bunch of other European pro teams before he was selected with the 31st pick in the draft. That was back in 2023. So he was drafted by the Detroit Pistons. His draft rights were traded twice and now are currently held by the New York Knicks. Now, here's the deal. He never signed an official NBA contract. He only participated in the NBA Summer League play. But under current NCAA rules, an international player can compete professionally before college enrollment as long as they don't get more than, the necessary expenses to participate on the team. Room, board, allowance, full plan, the whole bit. Now, the craziness of the NCAA nonsense with this dude, okay, is that Nanji is now cleared by the NCAA to play for Baylor with 4 years of eligibility remaining. This dude has been in the pros, no matter how you slice it. He's played pro basketball. Now, again, labor laws are a lot different as far as sports is concerned overseas. You can play 15, 16 years old and be a pro. We got this amateur status thing here in the United States. I don't agree with it, but rules are supposed to be the rules, right? And if you signed a pro contract and you were in games where you got paid, I don't think the kid should be allowed to play basketball unless it's in the G League. He's a pro, and he's going out there and taking advantage of piss poor rules by the UCLA. Okay, so he comes out this year earlier, played against TCU. He's met with boos from the crowd, and nothing worse than seeing 2 religious schools, Texas Christian and Baylor, home of family values, drug trafficking, sexual assault. But we won't bring that up while Ken Starr was president. Although we would be accurate, we would be right. We could do that. But I don't know who this gas bag that masked himself at NCAA president Charlie Baker. And whatever his salary he's getting right now, he's stealing money. So he comes out with a fake statement saying that the NCAA is not going to grant eligibility to any player who has signed an NBA contract. Wow. So if you were drafted and played in the G League and played overseas as a pro, we'll look past you. But, the contract situation and the talking behind out the side of the neck is really an unfair cloud. And again, what is Charlie Baker doing to make the NCAA a better, relevant, and more solvent, steward of intercollegiate athletics? Because they have totally missed the boat here. They have no regulation authority, right? They just let everybody do seemingly what they want to do. They have no control over the college football playoffs. The only thing that they can really run, and they're going to probably screw that up unless they get some real leadership in there. I mean, were it not for the men's and women's basketball championships, they've done a really good job with baseball and softball championships, but the golden goose is still the NCAA tournament. And you can't have players from foreign nations manipulating our rules to give their teams an advantage. But then again, that brings us to Baylor, RG3 University. Look the other way when women are being harassed. Look the other way when there's blatant racism on campus. And let's just embrace and open the doors to the place and what's really happening. Chaos. We got chaos in college basketball. And I never thought I would see myself siding with the John Calipari's and the Rick Pitino's of the world who have mastered the art of working the system. Make no mistake about that. And just think about it for a second. I am going to play the race card here. When you look at what happened at Louisville with all the sexual window, you had the prostitutes, you had the slush fund so that you could give prostitutes money so that they could, serve up players on trips. I mean, it was a pretty scandalous situation. Rick Pitino comes back, no show cause order. You've got guys like Bruce Pearl who've been given multiple opportunities to screw over in college basketball, and they continue to do it with reckless. At least this time, Bruce Pearl's been outed so much that, he knows he's damaged goods. He knows good and well that, he's got his broadcasting brand because network executives like his orange ass. But at the end of the day, some of the shadiest sports practices, which are going unregulated, thanks to a real laissez-faire attitude by the association. Who's going to fix the problems? Because basketball as a sport has problems. One thing about it is you can't build a consistent team. Part of it was you draft or you bring in a freshman class. They mature. You might catch lightning in a bottle with a couple of them at sophomore year. By junior year, this is a team that's supposed to be able to think about, if you built it right, winning a natty. Because you've been together. You know the system. You add a few moving parts. Now, it's just like, all right, everybody's on a one-year contract. If they don't like their playing time, they get more money, they gonna move. And then what happens? You got free agency in college basketball. So now that you got free agency, how do you protect the golden goose? Because if kids can start making moves that disrupt that apple cart and coaches don't have any control, where are we? A rudderless boat in the middle of the ocean. Anyway, I am Professor G. Mark Gray. It's OG Sports Rap on the network. Remember, folks, for those of you who may not understand, NFL is the big dog in North American sports. And rarely, if ever, is what happens off the field dwarfing what happens on it. And with all the, seismic landscape changing moves of the past 48 hours, it's hard to believe that we actually have an NFL draft coming up and how this year's playoffs are going to shape and mold the direction of playoffs past and future, quite frankly, because we got to go into the draft now looking a totally different way. I am Mark Gray. I spell it Mark with a K, Gray with an A. Barbershop is still open. We still got time to pour your cold one, line your trim up, you know what I'm saying, and send you back to the spot smarter than you were when you came into the place with some good old G pop-pop type of knowledge. Now, I ain't a pop-pop yet. Don't think I want to be one yet either. It's hard enough being a dad, especially when you got a artsy daughter who's got plays and stuff and all that kind of stuff here. But nonetheless, I think it's an interesting report that I saw on the NFL. And it's kind of interesting that this season, regular season, was dominated by first-round quarterbacks with old veterans like Matt Stafford and then a new generation of players, the Drake Mays and the Caleb Williams type. And think about it. These playoffs have a record-tying 12 of 14 teams that qualify for the postseason who are set to start a first-round pick as their starting quarterback. The only year in the Super Bowl era with two or fewer, first-round quarterbacks starting a playoff game came back in 2024 when Jalen Hurts and Russell Wilson did it. So for perspective, the NFL set a record this season with 219 of the 272 regular season games were won by quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round. That beat the old mark of 204, which was set 2023. And let's be clear about something here. You have to hit the quarterback home run with your first round pick. And the record isn't about a longer season because, according to the analytics, 80.5% of the games won by a first-round quarterback is easily the highest rate since the start of the common draft in 1967. The only other season with more than 70% of the games won by a first-round quarterback came in 2024 when the rate was 75%. If you want to win a championship, you have to have a quarterback. You have to have a high drafted quarterback. And that's why you see so many coaches right now who are getting run. And you can't tell me that those analytics did not play big in the firing of John Harbaugh. So the question becomes, Baltimore has their first round pick. He's played at an MVP level. The coach who went to bat to draft him, right, is now gone. So where does Baltimore go from here? Now, again, back to the notion of this postseason featuring 4 quarterbacks who were picked number 1 overall. Matt Stafford with the Rams, Carolina's Bryce Young are going to play each other in only the 13th matchup in the playoffs of number 1 quarterbacks in the Super Bowl era. And the other ones, you got Trevor Lawrence. He's a first round draft pick. And how about this? The only one who'll be starting this weekend's wild card round that wasn't a first round pick, believe it or not, is Brock Purdy, a 7th round pick, who quite frankly has developed into a quarterback that might be better than all of them because of the system that he plays in under Kyle Shanahan. So for what it's worth, make no mistake about it, you have to have that quarterback. And he has to almost be in sync with the ownership and with the coach before they go into the locker room. So this is really, really an interesting time if you're a football fan to look and see who's up under center and, quite frankly, who's blocking for the quarterback while he's under center. So this is a very interesting time. Now, there are 5 others who were picked in the top 10 that'll be competing this weekend. But it just goes to show you how you have to hit the quarterback pick right. Think about it. Number 3 pick Drake May, and 2018 number 7 pick Josh Allen of Buffalo. May gets to bring people up to Foxborough. That's a tough out. And you're looking at Josh Allen, okay, Houston C.J. Stroud, he was the 2nd pick in 2023. Sam Darnold, who's in the playoffs, leading the Seahawks. He was picked 3rd by the Jets in 2018. Justin Herbert went 6th to the Chargers in 2020. The only guys really, other than Purdy, and there were doubts about Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts knows what he's doing. Got to get that. You have to have the quarterback in the NFL. And when you do have that quarterback and you do not win, you end up like John Harbaugh. Now, I was a little shocked that, Mike Tomlin got the break because him and Aaron Rodgers are still playing. It'll be interesting to see what happens if that's a one and done in Pittsburgh. Because conventional wisdom does, in fact, suggest that the next game could be Aaron Rodgers' last game, whenever that is. Now, whether it's in the first round, wild card round, whether it's in the second round or whatever, maybe, the AFC's kind of wide open. The Super Bowl really is wide open. You can't really say that this year going into the NFL's tournament that there is a decided favorite. I mean, normally you'd be like, all right, if Kansas City were there, you were like, whoever's going to beat the Chiefs and Mahomes is the team to watch. They're not there. Can you hang your hat on a Josh Allen? I don't know. I mean, we've seen him do some Herculean things, but, I mean, damn, when you're the only one in the Army who's got a gun that's full of bullets, shouldn't you be dominant? So just looking at the landscape, one of the keys, you got to have a first-round quarterback or develop the hell out of somebody in the late rounds, which brings us to Kevin Stefanski. And why is he at the top of the list of potential coaching candidates to fill jobs when the most important thing you can do is to settle on the quarterback? And while he's been the quarterback whisperer, there's been no consistency at that position. And you have to wonder why. Was it the coach or was it the doofus organization that the Browns are? And I'm sorry, Cleveland fan, your football operation is doofus. And for those of you who are a certain name may not know the term doofus because it's really not a word that you can find in the dictionary. It's just you may not know how to describe it, but you know it when you see it. And the Cleveland Browns, they're doofus. Their ownership is doofus. Their front office is doofus. You get the question here. The stadium is doofus. It is just a doofus organization. Okay. So to see Kevin Stefanski, and he's had what, 6 losing seasons in 8 years and could never get the quarterback situation settled. So the numbers don't lie. You get yourself the right quarterback in the NFL, you win, or you're supposed to. And then if you don't, you end up like John Harbaugh. And that's what happened in Baltimore. Now that I've talked to a few people whose opinions that I value a great deal, I think that Steve Bisciotti, the owner, read the temperature of the fan base in Baltimore. And once you had the Mike Preston story about Lamar, then you had a couple of gut-wrenching losses. You know, the Steelers twice in like 3 weeks or something like that in games that they could have won. That really, if you ever still boil water to make instant coffee, you know, that's how I do my cup of espresso every morning. And you hear the whistle on the kettle. Well, that's kind of what happened to me, if you ask me, with the deal that went down in Baltimore. It was shocking. There's still aftershocks in that area right now. I mean, nobody can talk today because they're all writing and getting the inside scoop. Now, I'm going to effort to have some more clarity for that, hopefully tomorrow, when most of my friends that I know in this game have been, chronicling this madness. But that's why we love Associated Press. And you can listen to all that nonsense that, comes from Carolyn, that mattress stapled to my behind Levitt. You know what I'm saying. You really know what I'm saying. But once you get beyond that, it is clear that when you get to the postseason, your trigger man has to set the tone even more so than the coach. And so as we go into this NFL postseason right now without Patrick Mahomes, and let's be clear for something here. Patrick Mahomes was the alpha male. The bigger the moment, the better he traditionally played, especially in postseason. The question remains, does he have enough left in his tank? And will the Chiefs be able to fortify the spots around him? They got to get him a clutch receiver, somebody who can stretch the field. They got to get a consistent running game. And then you got to know how to use it. And I think Andy Reid would do that if he had it. So where does Kansas City go? First off, get Mahomes, because Mahomes is a different factor. He's a difference maker. He can mask a lot of, and so are these alpha quarterbacks. They can mask a lot of deficiencies because they know how to bring you back from when you're losing. And that player, I'm not quite sure, is in this year's postseason tournament. Now, it's a moment for somebody to take the mantle and do some incredible things like a Josh Allen. I think this is his time. Sam Darnold can sort of remake himself, a remix, if you will. So there's so many interesting things to watch, but the biggest factor will be, and it is proven, you got to have an alpha dog at quarterback who's going to win it. I think it's Jalen Hurts, but he too, like Nick Sirianni, needs to, get out of his own way and play with arrogance of a champion, because that's what they are. Anyway, I'm Professor G. Mark Gray. It's OG Sports Rap on the network. We all we got. Hey, get your paper, young fella, especially when it's out there. Have y'all seen the new Jalen Williams commercial? The Oklahoma City Thunder forward with the braids. Remember he, SGA, and Chet Holmgren were dressing like, Bopsy triplets in their commercials last year, and they were all pretty good. And when you got a big three and they important to the franchise where everybody is getting their own endorsement now. It's like, wow, it's like watching, I don't know, the Temptations just break up as far as commercials are concerned, right? And everybody is moving forward. And Jalen, I should say, has this thing for this company, I guess it's called Paycom. And I will say this, one thing about him. Hey, the dude has an impeccable wardrobe. He got the whole thing from casual fly to cosmopolitan fly to just, he's doing it. Get your paper, young fella. And it's like Oklahoma City's now becoming, the dominant franchise as far as their players getting TV love, endorsement deals coming out. And who would have thought Oklahoma City? The only thing I knew about Oklahoma City in the beginning was about barbecue bologna. Yeah, and it's pretty much a good delicacy if you can scarf down bologna. Of course, I live outside the nation's capital. I'm always scarfing down bologna. It just has to do with politicians, but that's a topic for another show. Anyway, as we proceed to give you what you need in order to be ready for the games of chance, and we're going to go with some sure shots a little bit later on this week as we break things down. I will say this: there was another thing that I forgot to note from that AP story, which has really changed the direction of football in terms of excitement. Somehow, the kickoff up until this year had become like going to the dentist for a root canal without any anesthetic. It was just tough to watch because everything kickers kicked the ball, they kicked the ball out of the end zone, and it was a wasted play. But the tweaks to the kickoff rule this season definitely worked out for the league when it came to the rate of returns. I mean, let's be clear for a second. When you're changing the tenets of the game, when you're changing the rules of the game, the fabric that we all grew up watching, the rule better work or there's going to be hell to play on a lot of different levels. Moving the touchback spot from the 30-yard line to the 35 has led to more returns as kicking teams decided we're not trying to kick the ball through the end zone anymore because we're going to give up an extra 10 yards. So in all, 74.5% of the kickoffs were returned this year, which doubled the rate or doubled and then some the rate of last year, 2024, the first year of the so-called, quote, dynamic kickoff. So the rules for kickoff changed, and there were only 6 touchdown returns this year. However, and this is where the excitement came back to that aspect of the game, 87 returns of at least 40 yards happened this year. And that's been the most for any season since 2010 when there was 114. Why is that big? It shifts the offense and gives them a push. I'm looking forward to see how that plays out in these playoffs. The big chunk plays traditionally do not happen in conventional offensive sets because teams have seen everything you did. There's no surprises, okay, because everybody has seen your tape. So there has to be an intangible, a difference maker that will lead to more parity and, quite frankly, make for more closer and exciting matchups. And field position is a big, big thing, especially in the postseason. So if you're going to have teams that were starting at the 30-yard line and you notice the amount of shorter fields that you have right now, we should have a lot of scoring in these postseason playoffs. They normally say the team with the best, it's defense that wins championships. I would argue right now that going into the postseason in the NFL, the dynamic has changed just a little bit because of the fact that you're going to have offensive teams starting with better field position. And when you have better field position, you're able to do some things, coach it more aggressively, open up the playbook a little bit more. Look, every team that's in the playoffs has seen now every game that the opponent has played this season. The first 2 days, if you're in the wild card round, you're looking at every game that your opponent has played this season. You have a benchmark. And when everybody has the same benchmarks, it will be intangibles that determine who wins the game. And this could be the season where, rest his soul, you remember a guy like Jacoby Jones. And it's funny that we bring him up because he had big, I think it was a kickoff return and a punt return in the last Ravens Super Bowl victory in 2013. Okay, he was, as close. I think he might even been MVP of that game. I don't remember, but he made two big special teams plays that defined it. And I'll say this: if you can get one of those victories, by having a big chunk play in special teams, chances are you win the game. And I would keep an eye on that. And especially when you're considering the games of chance that people like to put a few shekels on, I think you might want to look at that. If there's a parlay opportunity out there where you can get legitimate odds on kick returns for touchdowns, right? I think you might want to do that. I think that the special teams, more than just extra points and field goals, is now a component that's going to be a shifter. It's going to change a lot of games. And the beautiful part is that's one of the rules that the NFL has made that made the game great. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. There's some things they need to rework on, such as the completion of the catch in the end zone, which when you look at a big picture, Isaiah Likely in Baltimore is given the touchdown that I thought he so rightfully deserved. Pittsburgh's not in the playoffs. Mike Tomlin is probably fired, and John Harbaugh would still have a job. So they can work on some other things, but and I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of the technical nuances that go with the rules and stuff. This is a big rule. And looking at how the seismic shift in kickoff returns has helped the NFL from an excitement standpoint, field position standpoint, scoring's gone up. I mean, watch the teams. And I think that this is really where John Harbaugh can make a difference with a team that's on the edge of winning right now. Discipline and savvy could turn Harbaugh into the savior for football in Atlanta. If you're Atlanta, that's your coach. All right. I'm doing the work for you free of charge at ATL. Don't mess this up. Hire John Harbaugh. Okay. Let's open up the can. Because first off, John Harbaugh will come in with his program, and if he's there for 10 years, he'll become the greatest coach ever in the history of that franchise. And I mean, my goodness, you just think about the dubious people that they've had on the sidelines down there as an organization. Jerry Glanville, dude used to dress like he was coming out of a honky-tonk bar on the sidelines, I'll never forget him rolling up on me the first time I met him. Hey, Coach, how you doing? Nice to meet you. I had on a Grambling hat at that time. Shh, don't tell my friends it's Southern. But I had on a Grambling hat. It was one of those African-American College Alliance things. It was a product placement kind of deal. I had on a black hat. Went to shake Coach's hand. He was like, that hat, it's black. I was like, wow, okay. And I mean, he was like in stunned silence. This was the kind of stuff that they had down there. They had a guy named Marion Campbell. You know what they used to call him? Oh, my goodness. We're not going to talk about Dan Quinn blowing the Super Bowl, because one thing about it, we know if John Harbaugh gets there, he knows how to win and can beat his brother. So all things being equal, if I'm the Atlanta Falcons right now, that's the guy that I give the keys to the car and let him drive. He'd have a big voice in personnel decisions. He would have big voices in all the significant moves that impact the team. And he would do it with reason, and he would do it with confidence. And I think that Harbaugh may fit in with Georgia values. And again, I'm not hating on the guy. He did win the city of Baltimore Super Bowl, but he grossly underachieved. And what happens is you can go in there fire and brimstone when you're winning. And remember, Harbaugh came in and ruffled a few feathers when he took the job. I mean, everybody remembers him with fond reverence, but I don't think Ray Lewis appreciated the fact that I think he had to move his locker because Harbaugh wanted him to be in a different place. That's the kind of dude that Harbaugh is. Make no mistake about it. He's a my way or the highway type of coach. Now, one thing when it's your way and your highway, what road are you leading me on? I mean, you leading me on the yellow brick road to success, or are you leading me to a place of no existence? Because Atlanta needs a shakeup. And to me, the perfect fit is John Harbaugh. I'm not quite sure the Giants is necessarily the place for Harbaugh. And I put it out there because, I mean, not that he's confrontational with the media, but he just got a whole different way of carrying things. Now, he was a special teams coach in Philadelphia. He knows what it's like to coach on the East Coast, especially in weather games. But to me, the fit of life is Atlanta. You got less media. He'll be scrutinized, not as harsh, at least early on, because he's going to bring discipline and character to an organization that was moving in that direction under Raheem Morris. They just didn't get there fast enough. And see, that's the question. You look at Atlanta, they got a quarterback in Michael Penix who probably could learn some of the Lamar Jackson principles. And if they could figure out the right offensive coordinator to help him develop, and maybe that's Todd Monken. We don't know that. But the bottom line is, if I'm Arthur Blank, I'm giving a blank check to John Harbaugh to get him to come down to Dixie and become the greatest coach in the history of that franchise. Nobody's ever won a Super Bowl there. They've had one guy that took him to the Super Bowl. He's now coaching in Washington, Atlanta. Don't blow this. It's your boy, Professor G, Mark Gray. We are ready to tag up and head for home. So this is our last call. So if you want to get one, y'all come back now you're here. It's OG Sports Rap on the network. We all we got. All right, it's the last call, boys and girls, as we get set to lock it up and head for home. Reminding you that tomorrow we'll be all over the college football playoffs as the University of Miami gets set to take on Ole Miss. And one of the more interesting stories, because we talked about it earlier, how Ole Miss is really in a pickle. And I'm anxious to see how those young men, especially Trinidad Chambliss, handle the moment with all the distractions that are going on around their program, the way that the coaching staff has had to alter the dynamics of the way that you prepare for a one-and-done national semifinal game. So all things considered, Ole Miss is, well, first off, they got to win the battle from within first before they can really start thinking about the battle of their opponent when we get to, that time in the game where a play has to be made. So I'm interested in seeing how that plays out. But the big story that I wanted to talk about was there's a couple of them going on, because you start looking at the Kirk Cignetti thing. There are a lot of people who seem to think that his skill set and he translate to be a good NFL coach. And when you consider that if his quarterback, if he leads Indiana to the national championship and Fernando Mendoza becomes the number one pick in the draft, if I'm Kirk Cignetti, I really have to think about taking that job, because you could theoretically coach the next 10 years, which is about the length of the time your Indiana contract is for, and you could coach a quarterback that you helped win the Heisman Trophy? Come on, man. That's got to be at least a morsel that smells good before you taste it. And I would have to run it up there. I think it would be bad for college football to lose him, because I think he's a tremendous mind. I love the way his team plays, and he's an attack-oriented guy. I'm not quite sure he would be able to deal with the media the way that he deals with the Indiana. Yeah, I guess I'll call that the Indiana news media, because until this year, Indiana football was not a thing. He's created a thing. Do you let it go and go for the big bucks, or especially when you can coach this transcendent talent? I'd have to consider it. Now, again, life probably is never going to be as good as it is for Cignetti right now, given that, he's the king of the hill. Let's be clear about that. Other teams in the college football playoffs, Ole Miss still in transition. Cristobal is pretty much secure at Miami unless the wheels come off for at least another 5 years. And you can bank on the fact that, in the conference that the U is in, it could be their time to start running things. Clemson's not the Clemson of years gone by. Carolina, if Bill Parcells can keep his head out of co-ed's panties, then maybe, just maybe, Carolina could be legit. Duke is a program that's coming up. Georgia Tech is pretty solid, but I don't see any of those in the national championship mix. I just don't. But, he's already going to be making an annual salary, Signetti, that is, of over $11.5 million, quite frankly. He's got a $15 million buyout. So all things being equal, think about it. This is where Tom Brady comes in, because Tom Brady has now interjected himself, and Brady again. We all know the Patriots were really good at taking videos, so he must have some tape on somebody. Look, at some point, the NFL has to step in and say, Tom, you got to make a decision. Either you're going to be an owner or you're going to be a broadcaster, okay? Either you're going to be an analyst or a consultant, because the credibility of the Raiders will be questioned as long as Tom Brady has access to other teams in a work-related role, something that other consultants, other front office executives cannot do. Tom Brady gets a window into the soul of NBA franchises for at least 18 weeks a season. He's in production meetings are almost like team meetings, really. You're talking to the decision makers and the top players around the league. You learn things. You have a competitive advantage. And quite frankly, Tom Brady was a part of a franchise that knows how to cheat. I'm sorry. Spygate will never be lived down. And the fact that they burned up the tapes and all that kind of stuff, then there was a deflating of the balls. So we do know one thing, and one thing is for certain. Tom Brady, if he doesn't break the rules, will bend them, okay? And he learned it from Bill Belichick. And there are people right now who are questioning themselves on the NFL's or the Pro Football Hall of Fame committees that I know that are coming to grips with, okay, when Belichick is done, or when he's been out of the game for 5 years and his name comes up on the ballot, they're going to have a problem voting for him. And see, the bending of the rules is the thing that bothers me. And look, you can bend rules, but not break them, and you're still cheating. And I think that's where Tom Brady is right now. You put Tom Brady into effectively a situation where he's a part of the front office decision-making team. The information that he gathers during the course of the week becomes, and that information is done being a, quote, broadcaster, a journalist of some sort. You're asking questions, game plan, individual players, philosophy and direction moving down the line. Brady will have that as an unfair advantage because of his production meetings as the number one announcer on Fox News. So if he's going to be a consultant, to me, if he's going to be a part of the war room for the Raiders, he can't be in the booth any longer. It'll be cool to see him visit because everybody goes to the NFL Combine to look at talent. But when you're influencing decisions that affect the on-field product, that's criminal. I mean, it's akin to what stock people would call insider trading. I mean, it's cheating. It's sanctioned cheating. And when you look at how they benefited from the Tuck rule. Nobody knew about the Tuck rule until Tom Brady was hit by Charles Woodson. Okay. And that began the dynasty. And so ever since then, New England and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady were, they became icons on a somewhat flimsy move. And if you've ever seen close games, particularly late in the season when Brady was playing, you weren't going to beat Tom Brady and the officials. You had to beat the Patriots. And I think that's what happened finally with the Ravens once they, got their act together in like 2013 or what have you. It's a tough place to play when you're facing 11 players. And more often than not, you had the other team of striped shirts that was so sprung on the system that Belichick and Brady ran, they got the benefit of the doubt. And that's why I respect Tom Coughlin, because he knew what he was dealing with when he was coaching with the Giants, and he didn't give a damn about that perfect season. Remember, they lost on the last Monday night going into those playoffs before the rematch, and the Giants beat the Patriots, ending their perfect season. Now, again, the NFL has to come down. I know Tom Brady is their boy. Okay, I understand that Tom Brady, I guess, moves units, But it's fine for him to be a cover boy, glamour dude, avocado, ice eating. That's a wonderful life. It is. But he shouldn't be a broadcaster and a team rep. That is conflict of interest on any level. Sorry. It's just not right. It gives the Raiders a competitive advantage. Now, these are the Raiders we're talking about here, right? And they could use every advantage known to man because they just have been in their way for about 30 years. I mean, and I like Mark Davis. I think deep down inside, great dude, but he don't have the acumen, the football acumen that his dad did. Now, he's done wonderful things in the Vegas community. He is a significant contributor to HBCUs. Shouts out to Andrew Glover, the former tight end, who's in his ear, and that's why they're playing a HBCU game in Vegas right now. That's all. So I don't mean to disparage Mark Davis at all, because if the rule's in place, or there is no rule in place for Brady not to be insider trading, which is what he's doing. If you don't have any way to police that, which should be coming through the league office. Let's be clear about something. If you're going to fine players for the way that they wear their shoes and their socks, when you get no competitive advantage, oh no, it's league rule, it's a dress code violation, it's going to cost you $2,500 because my socks are too high, because I don't have a mouthpiece in. Well, now you got Tom Brady, the mouthpiece, who is now in conversations with players that you may be drafting, getting the inside scoop on what the tendencies are so he can communicate with coaches as they're doing their game plans. This is a place that the NFL does not want to go. And if you're an owner, I'm getting to the point right now where there needs to be some kind of legislation where you can't have a network job, and certainly not as the number one team of analysts on Fox or CBS. It can't go down for real like that. Now, again, you're going to have relationships with people in the organization that you played for. They may ask you a thing or two. That's fine. But to be in the war room for the draft? No. That's not getting it done, especially when you're serving as something other than a journalist. So be mindful of the Tom Brady rules. There's a different set of rules for Brady. Now, I don't mean to take anything away from his greatness as a quarterback and his future in the Hall of Fame, but there's been some nefarious things that have gone on, which really leads one to believe that if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it could be a duck. And Tom Brady is going to win by any means necessary, even if it means cheating, okay? And one thing about it, he was groomed in the ways of Belichick. He knows how to cheat, cover his backside, and keep it moving. So do the honorable thing, Roger Goodell. Have the conversation with Mark Davis and tell him, look, either Tom Brady is going to be a broadcaster or Tom Brady is going to be an NFL consultant for your franchise. But you can't do both and at least remain credible. That's just one man's opinion. Remember, you can hit me up at The Sports Groove 24/7, 365 on a computer, smartphone, tablet, however you get your social media groove on. I'm at Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. I'll let your boy be in 22 hours. It is OG Sports Radio. I'm Professor G. Mark Gray. Remember, we all we got.